Welcome to Alumni Talk Show. Our guest today is Aminata Zahra. She's a poet and a psychologist. Today we're going to talk about mental health and from a perspective of a specialist in mental health, and poetry, of course, from a winner of the Grand Slam. So we are all lucky today. Welcome all, and hope to have a good ride. Finally, we are meeting.
Alhamdulillah, finally.
We have talked for a while. Yeah. They have given us a webinar. We've actually never met.
Yeah.
So tell us about you. Who is Aminata Zahra? And do people refer to you as Amina or fully Aminata Zahra? Which is it?
Right.
Tell us about you.
Thank you. My name is Aminata Zahra Kalebi. Some people call me Amina, others Zahra. I think depends on what your mouth can say.
Okay.
Really, but I love all my names equally. I'm a counseling psychologist. I'm the director of Ahmed Kalebi Consultancy, and I head the counseling and wellness department. I'm also a consultant psychologist and a wellness coach, wellness coordinator. I'm a child psychologist, family and marital psychologist as well.
What do you mean child psychologist?
Yeah, child psychologist. So I do child psychology. I see kids matters to do with mental health. Yeah, and that's my current master's as well. I did my master's in child development and family studies.
MashaAllah. Did you finish your master's?
I'm almost done.
You're almost
Very
done.
close.
Yeah. How is your academic journey?
Alhamdulillah.
How has it been?
Not been linear, definitely. I started here in Lights Academy, and
From primary?
No, from year 10.
I came from primary.
Yeah,
from year 10. Okay.
Yeah, from year 10, and I finished my O levels here. Moved to Nairobi International School. I hopped around a few universities before I finally got to settle in what I love to do, which is psychology, and just carried that through. Alhamdulillah.
How was your life at Light?
That's such an interesting question to me because every time somebody asks how was high school, you want to say, oh, it was okay. But I think for me, I not forgot really, but there were such transformative years that looking back, it was okay. But in the moment, I think it was one of the hardest things I was going through during that time. I think just you're changing so much, you're learning who you are, you're expected to go out into the world and make an impact, make a name. Everybody's saying how important your grades are. And, that pressure is also just not easy. And it feels so much like, almost like a burden. And then you come out of high school and you think, school was so easy. Why was I stressing? But I think, subhanAllah, the environment was great. I made such amazing friends. I was in an amazing class group, alhamdulillah. And, so many of them are amazing, successful women today, mashallah. And my teachers were also, some of them specifically, I remember so well. And mashallah, they were so amazing.
Yeah, specifics. What are the specific ones?
Well, the one specific teacher who stuck with me was our history teacher, Miss Mercy. And I, to this day, don't know how she convinced me to do history because I had never done history. I did geography my entire O levels, and I came to Light Academy in year 10, and I switched to history. And I was so sure I was going to fail. I knew, I approached it knowing I was going to fail. But subhanAllah, there's a video she took of me one day when we're sitting on the floor in the corridor because we were so stressed and we were studying. And she came and she took a video of us and we were crying and studying because we were so stressed. And she sent it to my mom. And my mom to this day has that video. And subhanAllah, every time I think about high school, that's one of the most, like my fondest memories because she in so many ways encouraged us and in so many ways, sort of believed in us and let us know, like, guys, you're going to be okay, even when we didn't feel it. So Miss Mercy and, of course, our Abla, class teacher, Ms. Zainab, she was also, I think, like a mother to us.
Like Zainab? Deshodan?
Yes.
She's my workmate right now. We work together.
MashaAllah. She was amazing. She is amazing. I met her recently with my son.
Nice.
And she said, subhanAllah, look how people grow. Which I think is also amazing, mashallah. So alhamdulillah, small things like that.
What were the bad moments?
Oh man,
don't spare them.
I was raised to be polite. So. No, I think they weren't necessarily bad. Like I can think back and go, that was a terrible experience. SubhanAllah, Light Academy always felt so safe. I think what the ups and downs were mostly academic.
You were a day scholar, right?
I was a day scholar.
So safe.
Yes, I was safe. I was very safe.
Ask us borders, actually.
Well, that's a different story. I think my parents knew not to take me to boarding.
No. It's much better than the stories we hear from other schools. We had a good time.
Alhamdulillah, I really did. And it always felt, I obviously back then didn't want to come to school. You know, you wake up and you don't want to go to school. But thinking back at it, I did enjoy the 2 years I was in Light Academy. And I mean, subhanAllah, my brothers and I all finished. So my whole family are alumni.
Yeah, your own academy.
Yes.
Why?
I think when we love something, we truly just continue bringing everybody there.
What do you love so much about this school?
Again, the safety. I
the
think
safety.
for my younger brothers, Hamid and Marjan, they both finished Form 4 here. Shafiq stayed for 2 years and then moved to IGCSE. But I think for all of us, when we look back, yes, there are those hard moments. And maybe my experience is different because I was in the girls' school.
Of course.
But I think my parents always recognized how safe we were here on some level. You know, we hear of so many things in different schools. And I think one thing I can attest is that, especially for me personally and for some of my brothers, we were safe, you know, in school. And that's something I think I'll always appreciate and look back at.
Yeah. I believe they have the same like standards of safety.
And
Most people attest to the mentorship and the upbringing that they got here, apart from academics. Can you say the same?
Well, let me not speak too much. But no, the academics was great for me, I think. It was a lot of free learning, which later on helped me in life because I learned, you know, like university, nobody teaches you. So I think I learned that from Light Academy.
There's freedom in learning.
A lot of it. But I think back then it was also like you said, sorry, the mentorship, you know, the community, the sense of togetherness. There wasn't, you know, you and me. It was always us. And I think, again, I attest to my class group. You know, I had such an amazing, wonderful class group, subhanAllah. I sure we've all deviated and sort of...
Who are your classmates?
So many. I wish I could name all of them. Mashallah, we were many. I think we were one of the biggest classes.
Who are your closest friends? You don't remember that?
I do, but if I start naming names, I might get in trouble.
Not three people.
No.
Let me put it.
No.
I want to see if I
Actually, okay, I'll give a shout out to one person, and because her and I were connected in so many ways. Her name's Azmi Abdul Wahid, and we were in madrasa together, and I was in Arabi Jafri, and then I moved to Light Academy, and we now were in school together as well. So we used to go to school together, we used to go to madrasa together. We graduated O levels together, and we graduated madrasa together. And subhanallah, she's one of the people I have so many photos and videos of.
Nice.
I have so many photos from high school that sometimes I look back at and I'm like, wow, look at how young we were.
Almost 9 years later, almost 10. Are you still in touch?
I wish we were as closely in touch, but I do, and I'm not a stalker, but I do keep tabs, make sure the girls are doing okay,
nice.
you know,
Salwa,
Salem, all of
those
them.
friendships that you don't talk all the time, but when you link up, it's like the fire is still there.
It's like we're still together, definitely.
Same with me and my classmates.
Yeah.
Like, we don't talk much, but whenever we meet, it's like hours of catching up.
And I wish inshallah we'll do a reunion soon because they were really a very big pillar in my life at that
I hope
time.
Zainab is doing for you reunions.
I hope so.
I hope she's watching and she's organizing some.
She's thinking the wheels are turning. I hope so too. I hope so.
Okay, let's get to this your field. Why psychology? How did you get there? What led you there?
Interesting. Why psychology? Why? I don't know why. I think my reason for why changes every time, and only because there are so many reasons why I would have chosen psychology. The interesting thing is I started at Strathmore and I did law school. And I did law school for about 6 months. And I just told my dad, I was like, subhanAllah, no. I really can't.
Is it a spiritual thing? Because there's a common saying of lawyers and hell.
No. Not at all. Some of my closest friends are lawyers, actually, and no offense to them. But for me personally, I didn't connect to the profession. I think there are so many people who connect to their profession and they learn because they love learning. For me, as I was going through law school, and my former roommates, Arviza, can attest, I think I was miserable throughout because it was so much for me. And I'm a person who is very much intuitive, very much with loving to talk to the people. And I think law school felt for me like such an uphill climb. And then I moved to education. And I went to Riara University of Education and I was there for 6 weeks. So my time frame kept getting shorter.
Oh.
And in that, subhanAllah, I have always loved teaching. It's actually my next sort of certificate I'm doing is my postgraduate diploma in education, inshallah,
nice,
because I do
mashallah.
want to teach eventually, inshallah. But I've always loved teaching and I really wanted to do teaching.
Nice.
And I thought teaching would be my pathway into working with children. So I was at Riyadh University, but the subjects I chose ended up being dropped. And subhanAllah, I was sitting feeling so bad for myself. And I was like, I've wanted to do psychology since high school. But one of the things my dad mentioned was maybe do that later in life. Maybe that's not a career. You can do that as a second degree. And I just said, you know what? I remember I prayed istikhara. I woke up and I went to my mom and I said, I'm going to do psychology.
Wow, just like that.
And she said, wait.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm going to wait. And I was patient. And then I said, okay, let me go to Daystar University and do a Bachelor of Education. And I said, okay, I'll do my education and I'll try and see if I can get psychology as well. And I got to Daystar. I was
So Strathmore, Yara,
Daystar. So I was climbing up Bagadi. And I got to my end point. And I remember we were at orientation in Athi River and a Bachelor of Education was only being offered in Athi River.
Oh.
And I'm the only girl in my household. And my dad said, you can't be this far away. And if you are going to be this far away, this is not maybe the best environment.
Could relate to be about that.
Exactly. A bit too late. And I think by that time I was so soft.
That's true.
So he was worried. And my dad said, well, try and transition into something in Nairobi campus. And he said, maybe finance, maybe. And I just said, okay. And I picked the booklet. And the first thing was psychology.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And I just said, SubhanAllah, look, I'm where I want to be. And I remember walking into my first introduction to psychology. And I remember so vividly, it was Miss Luna Odawa who was teaching us. And I walked into that class, and the first class, I connected so much.
Nice.
And I said, I really don't think I see myself doing anything else. This is what I love. It's such a passion, subhanAllah. It in so many ways connected to me. And being in a Christian university did that for me as well. Because I learned so much about another religion. And in the Christian philosophies that they taught us, I was able to go back and ask myself, what Islamic philosophies tie around what I just learned? And that strengthened my deen as well, subhanAllah. Amazing. So I think I took the long road, but I got to the psychology. No. SubhanAllah. No regrets. I can't say. I think I would have regretted maybe how long it took me to get here, but I think my path also.
You'd have regretted being a lawyer.
Oh man, I really do think so. And no offense again to my lawyers, but I think for me personally, maybe not.
Okay, so my last podcast with the lawyers, they're nice people actually. I don't know why a lot of jokes are centered about lawyers and hell, but so from psychology to mental health, I think you're a mental health specialist if I'm not wrong, right? How so? Is there another field in psychology, or you just have to be a mental health thing?
And I think mental health specialist is quite broad. So I am a psychologist as a mental health therapist. It's sort of like a bandwidth. So we have the psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, therapists, psychotherapists, right? So we sort of all do different things. But myself, I am a psychologist. So I give more behavioral support, helping you figure out, how did you get to where you are and how can you get to a better place? In a slightly broad terms, of course.
Back to the basics, this mental health, what is it to you and what is it? What is mental health and why is it important? It's a lot of topic about mental health these days. It's quite a topic. What's mental health? Why is it important?
Well, mental health to me, I think on a sort of scientific definition, is how we think, feel, and behave, right? And so just to sort of encompass it encompasses everything that we do, who we are as people. So how you think about before you do something, as you do something, the after effects of after you do something, how you feel about it, your emotions, and how you behave, your reactions, your interactions with people and such. That to me is like the baseline definition of mental health. And then that then trickles down to, how you relate with people, how you form relationships, how you as a person function in society, your mental well-being in terms of how healthy are you mentally, how do you deal with stress, how do you cope, how do you communicate, all of that.
Does it have to do with anybody decision making?
Yes, definitely. Decision making is also controlled by your mental health. I think we associate mental health with the brain a lot, but the reality is because the brain controls everything, right?
That's true.
So because the brain controls everything, when you're mentally unwell, your brain takes a hit, and therefore you have the physical symptoms of being mentally unwell.
Now, what are the symptoms?
Heart palpitations, the hapa syndrome.
Yeah.
It's my favorite way to ask somebody if they're mentally unwell is how often have you been going to hospital for no reason? And when I say no reason, we check your blood works, you're okay. We check your kidneys, your limbs, and you're fine. Physically, you're okay, but you're in some sort of level of pain. Then I like to say that's the hapa syndrome. And realistically, if you look back, the person is either maybe stressed, maybe they're going through something difficult, they've experienced a loss or grief. There's a big change happening in their life, so their brain is sort of firing all these what we call psychosomatic.
So how do you differentiate between the mental health illness as an illness and the normal stress? How do you differentiate that?
I think not really differentiating it, but maybe recognizing that this is also a sign of stress, right? So one, asking yourself, for example, you ask, is my head hurting? Do I have a flu? Do I need to take Panadol? Also ask yourself, among those list of questions, am I doing okay? Right? Is there anything happening in my life that I need to deal with? Am I stressed? Have I been sleeping? Have I been eating? So, you have the doctor questions that you ask yourself, add mental health to that list so that if there is something happening in your surrounding that could have been affecting your mental health, then you're able to recognize, okay, this is more than just a physical thing. I need to take care of my brain as well.
Let's talk about today's world. Like a lot of people okay, quote unquote, they run to mental health. Like whenever things become difficult, whenever life becomes a bit, now they come to like my mental health, and this is a toxic work environment, which are not very common back in the days. Where do you find the balance here? Like, a job has to get done,
Right.
But someone has to be in a good mental health. Where's the balance here? How do you balance this?
One of the things I always empower people with is you are not the role, right?
You're not what?
The role that you are
okay.
in a corporate work environment, right? Me as Amina can sit as the director of my own company, but somebody else could also sit as the director of my company.
Yes.
Right? But nobody else is going to sit in me as Amina in my life. Nobody is going to be the mother to my son, the wife to my husband, the daughter to my mother. Nobody is going to be that person except me, right? So I always say, especially when it comes to work, recognize the person before the role, right? And how this comes into play is when you need the breaks, take them. I work with a lot of people in insurance and finance and such. You'll notice they have what we call like hard periods where they're going through like 6, 7, 8 weeks where they're just go, 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 go.
Yeah.
And I say, well, at the end of that, take a break. Right? Because like you said, the job has to get done.
Yeah.
But the reality is the job doesn't always have to get done by you. Right?
It's very competitive out there.
It is.
The job market is not very friendly to mental health.
Unfortunately. And I think also recognizing your capacity. There are people who cope very well in stress. There are people who naturally thrive when they're busy and they're active and proactive. I can give a very good example, myself and my dad, right? My dad, mashallah, is somebody who thrives in what I would call organized chaos, right? Mashallah, when things are sort of all over the place and he has to sort of move them along, he thrives in that environment, mashallah. And I can see a lot of the best work that he does gets done when he's up late at night, out in the morning, and he's moving. When things are a bit slow and quiet, like when he was on sabbatical, when he was on his break, you could tell he was getting a bit bored and a bit out of touch. Me personally, I love structure. If you try and disorient me a bit too much, I tend to shut up and freeze, right? So I think there are people who naturally, in recognizing my capacity, I recognize a lot of the things that I would like to do, I maybe can't do because of the way I am set, my personality. I counter that 2 ways. One, I go for personal therapy to be able to explore why that
Do you
is.
go to therapy when you feel you're overwhelmed, or do you go to constant, continuous, it's an ongoing thing?
Constant, continuous therapy.
Even when you're feeling good?
Even especially when I'm feeling good.
Why would you?
Because I want to know how to maintain my good, right? Yeah.
So you seek therapy when you're feeling good? To us, therapy is when like things are like out the door, like things are very bad.
Common misconceptions of therapy.
Let's talk about misconceptions. What are the misconceptions of mental health?
That you have to be what we call in our culture mwandazimu. For you to, so poor mental health equals to being what we call quote unquote crazy, unfortunately. Very common misconception, very common, myth, about mental health. The second one is that help or access to mental health services has to be done through the psychiatric centers. Immediately I ask you, where do you go to get help for your mental health? Madari, Chiromo. Those are sort of the most common, right? I sit here in Karen, right? And I am a mental health professional who can easily be able to help somebody in distress as well, right? So it is not about when you're in full distress and you need to be rushed to Madari that you seek help, right? Mental health is not always equal to somebody being suicidal or depressed. There is over 300 known mental health disorders, and they can present in very different ways.
Let me give a scenario, for example. Let me give a good scenario. And I'll put my question at the end.
Sure.
Right? Imagine a lady in the village, right? But this is not just common here, common in Kenyan settings. A lady in the village going through a lot of stress. The husband is a drunkard or left her. She's taking care of 4 kids, educating them, going to the river, and have so much stress. Now, put a lady in the city who is in corporate world. Let's say PwC. I'm not trying to name them, but they're common with that. I think
watch out.
they're common with that. Now, put a lady there in the corporate world. In 2-3 months, they mentally break down. And this other lady there in the village takes go through it all the time and all the time. Begs the question: is this mental health a class thing? Is it really a class thing? Because is it rampant in the city and not in the villages?
Right. I think exposure makes us more aware that somebody's struggling with their mental health.
You never hear people in the village committing suicide.
Really? Do we not?
Never heard of.
Really?
Yeah, but in town is so much.
See, that's the unfortunate misconception, because in the village they don't talk about it much, right? If somebody does take their own life, one, it's not by conventional measures. You know, they're not standing on top of tall buildings in the village because they don't have tall buildings in the village. But a mama is korogaing dawa to take because she's tired of her abusive husband, or a husband or a man is drinking himself to death. That is also a form of suicide, right? That is still dying by suicide. I think the misconception sometimes is that it's very linear. It looks like one thing, which is...
There's even a saying that says that if hard work equals richness, the richest people could be African mothers.
That's true.
But we never hear of their mental breakdown as we hear in the city. I'm still asking, is mental health this crisis? Is it a class thing?
No, I would stand with a firm no. Mental health is not a class thing. I think
where do the poor go for therapy to continue feeling good? Where do the poor go for mental health checkup? How do they...
They take care of themselves because they've learned how to make it work. For example, I can give a good example. It can work, right? And it still is mental health. I can give a good example. We were recently with a group of very amazing women, a part of the Maasai community. And when we're speaking to them, they talk within themselves, right? So when a woman is struggling, for example, you come to the Chama meeting and you have bruises, on your arms. We can notice you are limping a bit. They don't just say, oh, she's limping. All right, bye. Right? They go to her homestead when the husband has gone grazing with the animals, and they ask her, are you okay? What is happening? Do you need help? Do you need to be removed from this? Maybe they don't have the ability to do that, so they constantly check on her, right? When they notice the husband is home and the home is too quiet, they send somebody to ask, is that lady okay?
So what's the role of marriage in this mental health thing?
I think that is a whole other, I think, and I think the problem with sometimes being overexposed to matters mental health is I tend to hop around it. Marriage, again, like anything, can be good, can be bad for your mental health, right? You've noticed, unfortunately, a lot of women in domestic violence relationships, a lot of men in domestic violence relationships. We have the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence and the femicide. But you notice a lot of men also experience this, right? And a lot of them sometimes are within marriage context, whether traditional, whether court marriages, and unfortunately, there's a preconception that because you're married to this person, you're tied to them, you don't have the ability to leave. But sometimes marriage is somebody's saving grace.
Is it about... do you relate this to the rise in divorce cases that we are experiencing right now?
I will say yes, because also we're recognizing, or as, for example, women are recognizing, I don't need to stay here. I don't have to stay here. I think if I was to, and a very good example is sometimes I'll go home, I'll debrief with my mother about a case I heard. Of course, not with specifics, confidentiality and all. But I'll hear even about a case and I'll come run it by my mom and I'll say, oh, this lady left because her emotional needs weren't being met or, something of the sort. And my mom would say, wanawake siku hizi, girls these days,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And hamna like kuvumilia and all that. And I'll say, subhanallah, for me, if I was in her situation, it would be a no-brainer for me to also walk
Listen,
away.
I'm still not sure about this thing
Ah,
because a lot of people in the back of the day they persevere a lot.
right.
Like marriages used to last longer. Arranged marriages work better than these other marriages because of this.
Sure.
So really, how do you convince someone that this is not a class thing?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm still on
No,
that.
it's
It
fine.
doesn't sit well with me because
Yeah.
our parents used to go through a lot. For example, let's talk about money thing. Our parents used to do it a lot with very little.
True.
We are in the best era of doing business with social media, with artificial intelligence. This is the best time to do business. This is the best time. There's no better time to make money like than now. But still, the cases of mental health are still on the rise and the rise and the rise. Maybe this modernization is not really it for us.
It's not working to our favor. I think this is interesting because the other day I was debating with somebody, or not really debating, maybe having a conversation with a good friend of mine, and we're talking about why do a lot of women want to turn back into traditional wives, right? There was
They want to or they don't want to?
they want to. There's
Ah.
well, I don't know which side of the internet you're on, but on my side of the internet,
want to go back
a
there.
lot of the girls are craving the traditional lifestyle, right? And
Nature taking its course.
maybe reverting back, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I said, one, I think it depends on the person and the upbringing and who you want to be and who you see yourself as, which again, I go back to capacity, right? What capacity do you have to brave through being a businesswoman, making money, or sitting down, taking care of the kids, staying at home and having that quietness, right? I will say, I think class is not really the main component of this. I think more than or less than class is the individual needs of the society. We as a society have evolved,
Yeah.
right? And in our evolution into new, better things, we
Yes,
can
true.
say, right? Things have changed. And I think things have to change because if we don't and we're still stuck on the same repetitive lifestyles,
Yeah.
is that not sort of almost the definition of insanity as well?
That's true.
Yeah.
Now, diseases like malaria, just like homa, we know what caused these things.
Right.
But mental health, everybody has different triggers. And everybody goes through the same thing. How do you diagnose this was caused by this caused by this? If someone himself cannot really point out, because stress comes in different levels.
True.
So how do you point out to this? How do you diagnose these things?
I will say our profession is maybe one of the hardest because it is not something we can see and touch, right? Mental health, like if you go to a doctor, pay my blood pressure, do the blood works, they can rule out according to your symptoms. For us, we do almost the same diagnostic manual, right? We have the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Health Disorders, that sort of outlines when you see XY symptoms. Sometimes we have clients who lie.
That's very technical.
Yes.
Is it what you're doing at BKL or you're just
No, so the thing is, it's so broad because there are, for example, if you're a person who has issues with substance use, I can get a blood test to show if you're using substances, right? Then I can say, right, because of prolonged use of substance, it's affecting your mental health, it's affecting your relationships, therefore, substance use disorder is the line I go down on. But we also have a lot of what we call differentials.
Yeah.
A person who is using substance, maybe underlying is depressed, maybe underlying is bipolar manic, right? And so for us, one, we do a lot of supervision. I don't think I've met a mental health professional who isn't supervised by another mental health professional because two people.
Someone supervises another one.
Yes, always. I think that's the baseline for many professionals, but more so mental health professionals because we work with people. And I always say one of the hardest parts of our job is because people are so unreliable, unfortunately.
Life being life, stress never ends. How do you cope with this stress? How do people cope with what's the support mechanism? How do I go through life? Because stress will always be there.
Very
And
true.
does it mean that all of us will at one point will be like in a unhealthy mental health condition? How do we cope up with these things?
Okay. I think we're all bound to have poor mental health episodes, right?
Everyone.
Everyone, right? And this is because you can't always be at your peak. Like you said, life is lifing. Things happen. And
Adulting, they say.
exactly. And oh my goodness. And the thing is, sometimes we think it's just adulting or just the growing up that hurts. But I also like to reference for children, and as I work in the child field, in the child profession, I hear and recognize a lot more that this is something that is innately who we are, even from the younger years. I can give an example. When I transitioned my son from my bed to his bed, that must have been such a big change for him, right? And if I was to have sort of like a blood work test that I can do for mental health, I'm sure he'd have had poor mental health because that must have been so disorienting to him. Or maybe the first time I left him in school alone and went home and then came back and picked him, he must have felt like the world was crumbling down, right? His stress and my stress are still stress,
So
right?
how do you cope with those?
So one of the best ways to cope with stress, one, is find a support. Create a support network. I always say there is power in the people, right? Find people who you feel safe with. Find people who you feel can listen to you, right? Find a way to release those emotions. If you cannot find it in people, journal. You know, journaling is a great outlet. Common misconception is journaling is pen and paper. It's not always that way. They have
My iPhone is a journal.
yes, typing the journal on your phone, and also audio journals. Audio journals just work is just as well. One of my favorite things is I can barely read my own handwriting. So what I do is on my way to pick my son from work, I usually record and just speak about my day and speak and vent about my day, and that's my audio journal. So
What's a support system?
my mom.
Stop there. I was hoping you'd say that. I was really hoping. I was really hoping you'd say that. In one of your poems, it's called My Mother Tell Me. I really like the opening. When you say, my mother tell me I'm my favorite daughter, although I'm the only daughter. Well, that's really nice.
Thank
But
you.
in that poem, going forward, you talk about some troubles. It's like it's a cry for help. I don't know what you were going through at that poem. And in many of your poems, sorry, but you mentioned Reza in
Yes.
2 or 3 of your poems.
Yes.
Have you ever been suicidal?
Trigger warning, I think, for the people who watch, because this can be very sensitive to talk about, isn't it? I think, one, I always give a trigger warning anytime somebody gets my book, because it does talk about a very
I needed
dark
that trigger warning.
period.
You really mentioned that.
Yes, it's a very dark time. I think I would like to reference, not all of my pieces are about me as Amina.
Thank God.
Right? No, wait, just wait. Not all of my pieces are about me as Amina. Some of them, and one of the ways that I, like you said, deal or cope with my stress is through poetry. I can hear a very hard case and wonder, if this person had the ability to conceive this into poetry, how would they do it? And that's how some of my pieces are born. I think with a lot of the darkness that I've written in my books,
Scary.
a lot of darkness, well, not unfortunately, because it is also
it's
a
life,
very innate part of who I am. I like to recognize that that is not always me. And in the me I am today, I have grown to the point where I'm able to share.
Wow.
Right? I think a very big part of it is recognizing it's out there. Yeah.
When did you start writing poems?
Oh man, start writing? I can't really pinpoint. I know I've always loved writing and reading, especially reading. My mom always likes to tell the story. There was one of my aunts who came home, and she was a medical student, and she had these really big books. And I used to say, Mom, I want to be a doctor. And she said, why? And I said, because I want to be like Auntie, because she gets to read big books. And to this day, I love reading. I have a bookshelf in my house, and I keep constantly filling it up. And I've always loved words. I've thought words are my favorite form of expression, you know? And more than that, I've recognized that there's so much power in these words.
You haven't answered my question, but I'll skip it being a trigger.
When did I? Oh, no. Oh, about suicide? Suicide?
Yeah.
Have I been suicidal? I'd be lying if I said no. But I might be altering the truth if I said yes. I think it's a very sticky, because it's not something that's black and white, right? It's not like, oh, you're suicidal meaning you wanted to kill yourself, or you're not because you didn't want to kill yourself, right? It's also, did you ever wish that you would not wake up tomorrow morning? Did you ever wish that, you would just sometimes forget and walk in front of this matatu that's coming?
We have a lot to learn on mental health.
Yes.
Because I'm sure most people have been through such kind of phase. We just don't
Unfortunately.
realize that that's classified as suicidal.
Unfortunately. And, I think also in our country, we have a lot of stigma around it, right? And even with the laws, with mental health being a known crime, not mental health, but dying by suicide being a known crime,
So we diverted here when you talk about your mother. So
Sorry.
let's go back to your support system now. What's your support systems?
I think I mentioned to you at the beginning, we
Yeah,
tend to divert in
yeah.
conversation. My support system, my mom, of course, because growing up, it was just me and her. We're the only girls around. And mashallah, anybody who came into our household almost always was a boy. So I grew up around a lot of boys, and my mom was always my baseline, mashallah. She will say otherwise, because for a lot of my teenage years, I was angry at the world.
The rebel
And
usually.
oh my goodness,
Yeah.
subhanallah, I don't know how she got through that, but I was so angry at the world, and she was the one who took the hit for me. Mashallah, I came out, I think, okay. And she can come home and tell me now, "Oh, you really put me through a lot."
That's true.
But my mom, one of my biggest support systems, to my husband, alhamdulillah. I've been married close to 7 years now.
Wow.
Yes, alhamdulillah. And he's a person who I turn back to. I cry a lot. I'm a very emotional person. He doesn't like hearing about my work cases, but sometimes he knows when I've had a really heavy work day, because I deal with children, I deal with adults who've gone through a lot. It can be hard to hear. So I've recognized not to tell him what I've gone through at work,
Are you
but
also his therapist in a way?
no.
Why not?
Very careful.
Oh, why not?
I'm very careful about that. I think I take off my therapist hat when I'm at home, because then I tend to not be a good partner when I'm a
I
therapist,
get
right? Because I put the other person first.
some harsh realities.
Yes, yeah. I think there's a common misconception that when you're married to a mental health professional, life is great, because we're the ones who fix
It's
the
true.
problems, right? But I think one, that's a very good misconception, and but also the reality is we don't apply the tools to ourselves.
Yes,
Not
true.
all of them,
I
at
was having
least.
the same conversation a few days ago. I was speaking to another specialist,
Mm-hmm.
just a normal conversation, and she was saying that the worst teachers are spouses. If you want to learn something from your spouse, you can never learn it. And she couldn't
True.
explain why. We just mentioned
True.
that it's really not happening.
Yeah,
So it's the same
yeah.
with mental health.
Very true.
I hope it's
Yeah.
not the same with doctors.
Well,
You never know.
I think some relative professionals, but yeah, I think and Lubna, my cousin, my aunt, my grandma, she's also she's all of these things because we're around the same age,
Yeah.
and she's an aunt really. But Lubna and I are very close. I always say she is my platonic soulmate, and subhanallah, she came into my life when I was in Light Academy,
Oh,
actually.
nice.
And she was the person I threw all my Light Academy
Ah,
stress on. And I always say I've grown up with so many boys, and Lubna stuck as one of the first girl friends I made. And she was family, she is family, and she's become so much more than that. So she's the person who I work with now, mashallah. Under AKC, she's the head of operations, she's my operations manager. And she's the person, anytime you hear me on the phone, it's Lubna. I
ah,
tell her everything. I tell her where I am. I tell her where I'm going.
nice.
And so those three people really,
It seems you have a very good support system
alhamdulillah,
around
I
you.
do.
So, what do you advise someone with not so lucky, who is not even so
Yeah.
lucky? How do you advise such people?
I think recognize one that you don't have the luxury of having a support in people, right? I think one of the hardest things is when you don't have people who can be your support system. Shifting that one, either you set expectations on people who you know are going to let you down, and that can get really, really hard and really draining,
Now, let's look at
right?
it from the other side. Now, let's say your support system, your mothers, your friends, and stuff. How do the friends and families be support system without crossing that boundaries? Being careful of not overdoing it, or being careful of going to your personal space. Is there a thin line between that?
I think there is a thin line, but one thing about a support system is the biggest part of it is that there's safety, right? And safety, I always say, is not comfort. Safety can also be in the uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
For example, with my mom, if she's asked me a question that I feel has overstepped, I'll tell her, Mom, I know I can't tell you that, or I don't want to talk about that right now. And there's no hard feelings between us about that. Maybe there is, and that's okay,
Okay.
because she's still my safe
Yes,
person,
true.
right? So I think with a safe space or a safe person or support, the biggest thing is recognizing there is support in the good and the bad. There is support when it is comfortable and uncomfortable as
That's
well.
true. Let's talk about the youth and mental health. This is really a problem. The suicide cases are on the rise among the youth. Do you think social media or screen time plays a role in this?
I think yes, it can, especially with
Is there
how,
pressure from social media for people to be
yes.
uneasy on the mental
Yeah,
health?
I think social media can at some point set an unrealistic standard, right? You look at the person you want to be, compare your age with their age, and suddenly you're like, oh man, I'm not doing enough. And that can get you feeling really bad about the life you are living, right? And also, there's a very heavy influence on what we consume on social media.
It's all about influence.
It's so
It's all about
influential,
influence.
and it's the problem with that is what the algorithm tends to work against you,
It's true.
right? I've had a lot of people come into my office and say, I have ADHD. And I'll ask, oh, interesting. Why do you think so? So I was watching these TikToks, and there's this TikTok, and this TikTok said, and this TikTok. And I'm like, right, well, TikTok is not our baseline for health, right? But the reality is social media influences us a lot. I always say, one, having a detox from social media is very important now and again, right? Stepping away and my mom says going to touch grass, but I think just stepping outside, right? Meeting your friends, talking to people, simply switching off your phone and spending time with yourself. And then two, everything you watch is great and it's okay and it can be healthy as well, but recognize what your reality is.
Reality.
Right?
Expectations
Reality.
and all the friends.
Expectations versus reality.
Is it about
very
the
important.
content or about the screen time?
I think what the screen time can affect, especially because of the position you're in, maybe you're hunched over, but
I
again,
think screen time is more about the physical condition,
the
not the mental health
physical,
condition.
right? And then can lead into your mental health because you're tired, you haven't gotten good sleep and such things. But then the content mostly, how influenced we are by the content can definitely affect our mental
How
health.
do you change the negatives to positives?
It depends on what negatives they are, because sometimes negatives are okay.
Yeah. How so?
Sometimes bad things are not always there to be fixed, right? Sometimes a bad thing is simply a bad thing and that's okay. For example, something like grief.
Yeah.
Grief can feel like a very big negative, right? But on the days that you can laugh about your grief, that's okay. It's still not the greatest thing in the world, is it? It's still grief, but you can laugh about it a bit.
Do you have to go through the stages for you to be like fully healed?
That's another thing, is a lot of things to do with mental health. When we say stages, we're not saying that one happens after the other. It is not linear.
We memorize the 5 stages of grief.
Oh, that is something I like to emphasize every single time I talk about grief.
Yes.
It is not linear at all, right? You do not today wake up and you're angry, tomorrow you're in denial, right?
But when you arrange it in that order, it makes sense. Like,
It does make sense, doesn't it? Because it's
you can't be in
almost
denial and
like,
then angry later.
but you can, you can say, no, this person isn't gone. There's no way they're gone. In fact, if I call them right now, they're going to pick. And then a couple of days later, maybe you had plans to go somewhere and now you're angry.
See something new of that. I always thought that they come in order. Okay, when I picture all my grief moments, they come in like in that order.
I'm happy for you. So again, grief is not the best thing,
Thanks for this.
but if it's some way linear, again, this is just a guideline that we use, right? It's a general outline. But there are also people who years later, is when the anger comes up. Years later is when they start bargaining, right? So and grief, I think, never fully goes away, right? You just learn how to cope with it better.
Okay.
So the expectation that 10 years from now I will stop grieving is very unrealistic, right? There will be those moments, but it's not linear at all. It is not something that tomorrow finally you wake up, you're in acceptance, and you never go back to grieving. Oh, I accepted my grief and now I'm good. No.
Do you deal with cases of like bullying, body shaming, these kinds of things?
Oh my God, yes. Unfortunately, I do. It is one of the hardest parts of the work I do, if I'm being honest. But just because it is hard to see kids going through that, right? It is hard to recognize that the safety we had and some sort of level of comfort that we had when we were in school is no longer there. And
Others go through it as well.
very true, right? And even like, for example, bullying in the workplace, right? And protocols and systems are there to help. But I think with adults, we're more resilient to recognize we're being bullied and then fight back. With kids, unfortunately, I've had a lot of cases of kids dying by suicide because of bullying. And that has been, I think, one of the hardest parts of my profession.
But things like body shaming goes a long way, right? If you don't change it, for example, and stuff. How do you cope with that in the adult age, for example?
Body shaming? I think
you have a lot of poems on that, right?
I do.
This is not about you. This is these are general people. How do people go through that?
No, it's okay. I went through a lot of body shaming when I was younger, unfortunately. Everybody goes through body shaming.
I was really tortured by people from Mombasa about that.
Oh no, and that's so unfortunate, isn't it? Because you look at your body and the person whose body is the exact opposite of yours, and you're both getting body shamed, right? So one, recognizing there is no ideal. What ideal is to some people is not what is ideal to you or to other people, right? So more than just your physical body, if you are healthy and if your body carries you through life, then it is good enough for you, right? So recognizing, one, there is no ideal. There's no baseline standard as long as you're healthy. And two, the people who are body shaming you, right, don't know enough about you.
What has been the conversation about mental health going forward? Like from the past, these things were not there. People are not talking about these things. What do you see the future being? How do you see going forward the conversation about mental health and these kind of things? Are we going to the better places or dark places?
I think we are in what I would call a formative dark place, but I think this is necessary. This is a very necessary part of generating awareness, unfortunately. I think right now we're in a very question mark phase, almost like a Blue's Clues of what is going on? What is this mental health? And why is it so important and popular? Which is what we as mental health professionals really appreciate currently, right? I mean, we've only recently been recognized by the Ministry of Health and the government of Kenya
Recently.
as very recently. I actually got my license the beginning of this year, where we're now recognized as professionals. So we finally have the official government counselors and psychologists board.
Mlikuwa tuseme na waganga back.
Imagine, right? So there was no guidelines, meaning everybody could be practicing, and then there were no clear systems and protocols. But right now, we really fought, and we have such amazing structure. Sure, we're starting and we're young, and we're looking forward to better structure and better, certifications and policies and such. But we've been recognized, right?
Because I think in African setting, it's not common for us to go and speak of our problems, especially talking it out. It's not been common for us.
Right.
Now imagine being told to talk to a stranger now, sit down with a specialist who is a stranger to me and talk about my problems. Many people, many Africans are not forthcoming with that.
Yes.
How do we advise such a person?
Yeah. Therapy is sensitive, right? But recognizing the last thing I will do, actually, the one thing I will not do is judge, right?
Okay.
And then two, I don't start and say, okay, tell me all about your problems. Tell me about your childhood traumas. Tell me about what's wrong with you. Right? That's not how we come. I know sometimes it can be jarring because it's like, how am I going to open up so much about myself to a person who doesn't know me? We ease you in, right? Part of why we go to school and learn how to do the work that we do is because we learn also how to finesse people to, one, create safety, create comfort, and build rapport. Right? I always say, if you're not comfortable with your therapist, tell your therapist. You can either request to change therapist, or you can ask your therapist to change the approach.
How do you get a person who doesn't believe in this thing to get to therapy? That's the first problem. First,
Right.
I think.
I always say, for my non-believers, I say, I don't approach you as a therapist. I will admit, and maybe this is not the best thing for me to admit, but I don't always walk into a lot of spaces as a therapist, right? Just because there is still that stigma, right? And some places I'll walk in as a female therapist, and people will approach me with the idea of, so you get paid to talk, right? Almost like Madarao. But I've come to recognize it is not because that is how they feel about me as Amina. It is because they simply do not know the profession, right? I say your friend in a way is your therapist because you talk to them, right?
True.
You're the driver on the way to school. As Kenyans, we have a habit of complaining a lot about things, right?
No, politics especially.
Exactly.
When you enter an Uber, there's this common
You
saying
and the Uber driver.
There's this common saying that when you enter Uber, they get that serikali ni mbaya. Two conversation starts there.
And immediately we're all rallying up, isn't it? And that's how we start. And that is therapy in itself because it's a form of self-expression. It's a form of conversation. So yeah, sure, therapy is more nuanced.
But we have a long way of getting people to accept professional therapy. Right?
That is true, but we're also not in a rush to get people to accept professional therapy, to be honest. What we're more hoping to achieve in the near future is for people to just recognize their own mental health and recognize that when I'm not okay, it is mental health. It is a mental health issue, right? Na si wandazimu.
Yes, true.
Right?
We have cases, many, I think you have realized that some cases, like someone who seems fine, especially introverts, they look so fine, and then you hear that something bad happened, like, oh, he was just fine. We never knew he was going through a lot. What are some of the red flags that we can identify of someone going through some issues?
So, especially in people who are reclused or quiet, one of the things you can notice is hygiene. So they're not combing their hair, they're not brushing their teeth, they don't smell great.
You're going back to Indonesia.
Yes, unfortunately. And that's where the misconception comes in, isn't it? But they sort of neglected personal hygiene. They have no concept of time. So you tell them, we'll meet after Asr. And after Asr, you see they're walking away. They're daydreaming a lot. They're spacing out. They're more reclined than usual or reclused than usual. And so there are small, small things, but also recognizing everybody's mental health is their own to safeguard first.
Okay.
Right? So if I, as Amina, am introverted and I am struggling and I don't know how to reach out, right? The first thing I have to be able to do is admit that I am struggling. Right? You can't tell me it's not. Amina, you're struggling. Let's go get you therapy.
There's no way we can actually identify some signs in someone. Okay, the hygiene part.
Maybe not, right? And then there are also people who are very good at hiding that they're struggling.
That's true.
Right? I have had clients who are some of the most influential people in Kenya.
I think it's a culture thing.
It can be.
It's an African culture thing.
Be.
It's even in marriage, we are not allowed to talk about our struggles outside.
Yeah.
The women are told, don't speak bad about your husband.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's a culture thing.
It is a culture thing, and I think sometimes we have to learn how to undo culture on some level, because culture is a very big part of who we are as people, and I acknowledge that. I personally, as Amina, have gone through such a journey in accepting my culture, one, and then being proud of it, and then representing it, right?
Does the culture suppress your outlook of mental being?
On some aspects, yes, I will say. I will have to admit. There are aspects, for example, like marriage, right? There's a common kuvumilia, right? And that's such an unfortunate.
And they really insist on that when you're going to marriage,
isn't it? And that what the problem is, we don't define what is kuvumilia. There's a program that we do which is premarital counseling. We have asked that it becomes almost something mandatory for couples to do before they walk into marriage. Just to understand, yes, culture is telling you something. Yes, society is telling you something. This is what, from a psychological mental health perspective, is necessary, recognized as what you two as couples should be going through. That's what true. Is norm and what is out of norm, isn't it? Something like kuvumilia. I'd like to speak on this for a second, because I've had women who have been in cases of domestic violence, and she'll say, but he only hit me when I made him mad. He only hit me when, because I put too much salt in the food.
That is a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, right?
Almost, isn't it? Right? And at that point, then you ask, but why didn't you say anything? Well, Mamango Benebia, I'm not the first one to be beaten. Even she was beaten by my dad. Right?
Interesting. How do we improve our mental well-being? How do we stay always on the good side?
Well, I will say, one, recognizing that you have bad days. Very important, right? If you're always mentally happy all the time, I am also going to get concerned. Yes.
Because you're not supposed to be happy all the time.
No, happy all the time, I think, is an unrealistic expectation, right? So knowing that you have your ups and downs, and that's perfectly fine. How you deal with them is what is important. Two, stay connected. Stay connected to people. Stay connected to doing what you love. Go outside. Take time. Touch grass. My mom will love it. Touch grass, right? Touch grass. Connect with people. Connect with yourself. Spend time with yourself, and not feel lonely.
Let me give you a moment. There was a time in university when I was in uni, I think my third year. I had come home from uni, just I think 4-5. I came home, found some good food. I ate really well, really. I had some money in my pockets. Life was good. I slept on the carpet. This is me. This is my personal story. I slept on the carpet. I just look up and I just ask myself, what problem do I have? I've never lived that moment again, but I never always remember, how do I get to that moment? I've never relived that moment again.
Yeah, that was golden.
There are bills and stuff, everything is chasing me. But that was a good moment.
Alhamdulillah, I'm glad you got to experience that.
What do you mean? I can't experience it again?
You can. You definitely can. But at least now you know the good times, right? Yeah. Recognizing what made you happy in that moment. Was it the lack of responsibility?
I had no problem. Life was good.
Right. Yeah. But I'm sure it felt like you had no problems, right?
I had no problems.
You had no issue. For sure. Nothing at all.
I sat there for a while. I asked myself, what was do I have?
Right.
Yeah, I had some good food that day.
The interesting thing is that you were looking for problems to try and diminish that.
Solutions. Let's say adulting.
Yeah, I think life is lifing now for you.
Yeah. Okay, there's two questions here. Some people are asking, how do you approach building trust with your clients?
Me as a therapist,
Yeah.
I would hope. The first thing is approaching them as a person, right? So when you walk into my therapy room, hi, how are you? I don't go into straight, my name is Aminata Zahra Kalebi. These are my qualifications. This is exactly why you need to see me as a therapist.
Yeah.
How are you doing? You okay? Yeah? Feeling good? Are you comfortable? Do you want to switch chairs? So the first thing is just making sure the client is physically comfortable. If you notice some sort of resistance, of course, we have the baseline of what you need to tell the client the first session that they come in, which is if they intend to harm themselves or somebody else, you have to report it, and that they have to sign, and that sessions are confidential. But after you go through the technicalities, I always say, do not pressure your client to talk.
Okay.
Do more listening first, right?
Active listening.
Active listening, very important. Thank you for mentioning that. Active
There's a book I
listening.
read recently. It's called Never Split the Difference. They talk about negotiation. I just talk about active listening.
Interesting. And I think a lot of therapy is negotiation, actually,
It's
because
true, right?
you're giving me so much of who you are, and in return, hoping that I'll be able to help you. And therefore, I need to give you a lot more back, isn't
Active
it?
listening.
Active listening. And so, how I like building trust with clients is first I ask the client, is there anything that I can do to help you feel more comfortable?
Oh,
Right? I have had sessions where I do them on the floor,
nice.
where we just sit down. I've had some clients who maybe have had a problem with, how hot it is, open up some windows, we go do therapy outside. I've had a couple who have had to sleep, right? So we just if they're lying down on my couch, they want me to lie down too. And it's almost like we're in our sitting room,
understand.
right? So some of them don't want me to write notes as they're talking. So I put my notebook away. So asking the client, is there anything I can do to make you feel more comfortable? And then another thing is recognizing this is a person who maybe has not been in this setting, right? So answering all of their questions at every point, if you tell me, oh, I went through this and this and this, don't say I don't go. So that sounds like childhood trauma. So that sounds like depression.
Does the therapist get to say, I don't know?
I do say I don't know a lot. I do say I don't know. And actually, that's a big part of therapy is humanizing who you are. I do not know everything, right? One of the things I avidly avoid saying is, I understand, right? Because
Or I told you so.
oh man, that one I don't think I say at all. I think I have a few clients that I'm very comfortable with that I'll be like,
I told
what
you
did I say? But I think I avoid saying, I know how you feel or I understand how you feel. I try to avoid that as much
how
as
you feel.
possible. I know how you
It's a
feel.
bad one.
It's not a bad thing to recognize with my friends, with my support system. I
Yeah.
say it a lot, right?
On a
In
professional level.
therapy, I avoid it as much as possible because I do not know how you feel.
That's true.
You are telling me how you feel.
That's
I
true.
cannot understand how you feel, but I can understand how that would be hard to go through, right?
Wow.
So
That's nice.
the words that we use are very important in the therapy room.
Yeah, the second question is, how can people connect with you or learn more about your work?
My social media.
LinkedIn. I went through your LinkedIn. The podcast there are nice.
Oh, right. Thank you. Yes. So I have my LinkedIn, I have my social media accounts, and I have AKC Counseling is the main company profile is a.k.c_counseling. That's where we post all of our work and where you can get into our personal WhatsApp and you can reach out to us about anything. And when you do, just ask for Amina and they'll give you my number as well. So my personal social medias is the Poetic Snob, which interesting, but Aminata Zahra Kalebi as well just works. And you can reach out to me in any of those and I'll be able to have the conversation.
As we're going forward, talk us about motherhood a bit. You really mentioned it in your poems and stuff.
Yeah.
I said that I have to. How has motherhood affected you and your work?
So I had my baby during COVID.
What?
I had my baby during COVID. I had my son during
During
COVID.
COVID.
And
You had a lot of time with this.
the world had shut down. And I think it was so scary because I was like, okay, so now what? Right? Do I go back to school? Do I not go back to school? Do I take a year? SubhanAllah, I think I was about 3 or 4 months postpartum and I was back in school because it was all online. And I got to have time with my son and take care of him as I continued to go through school. When I won the Grand Slam, the main sort of the grand mini Grand Slam, I had just found out I was pregnant with my son.
Oh.
And
that must be overwhelming.
it was so scary. I think I to be honest, forgot I was supposed to go on stage.
Wow.
And I remember like a day before, we were having a debrief And Lubna was like, "Do you remember that this is something you have to do tomorrow?" And I told her, "You know what? I have one good piece and that's it. I'm going to go, I'm going to do my piece, and then I'm going to go get eliminated and sit in the crowd."
I've watched it on YouTube. It's nice.
Thank you.
This is really nice.
If you can't tell, I was nervous.
I couldn't tell.
So nervous.
I watched on YouTube, but I have been to one of your poetry shows in Alliance franchise.
Oh, and I was nervous.
Yeah, that's
Every
the first time I
time.
learned people that in poetry people don't clap, they just snap.
Yes, we love the theatrics of it, isn't it?
I watched your show live.
Thank you, and I appreciate. Thank you for being there as well, and I hope it was good. I hope you enjoyed it.
No, it was nice.
We'll talk after. Right?
It was nice. Not since we're in poetry. Are you a better poet or a better psychologist?
I am good at both in my own regard.
That's it.
I am good at both in my own regard.
Really?
Yes.
Where are you more comfortable?
It's a hard question because I think I thrive in both settings. My psychology feeds my poetry, and my poetry feeds my psychology.
We'll pause the poetry for a while. I have a question here that I think it's how do you call it? Trigger what?
Oh, okay. Trigger warning.
Yeah, trigger warning. Right? What do I do when I feel that suicide is the only option?
Recognizing why do you feel like that is the only option, right? So asking yourself why is that? Why is it the only option for you in this moment? And it might feel like the only option, but have you talked to somebody about it? I guarantee you one other person around you is going to tell you it's not the only option, right? Reach out and get help. We are here to help you. We have the 24-hour hotlines, the 1190. It is a hotline that you can call when you feel suicidal, and they'll be able to dispatch somebody or even stay on the phone with you, right? I will say I understand how hard that can be and how all-consuming it can be to feel like there is no other way out. I'm not saying a but. I'm simply saying that there is a way that you can get help, and we are here to help if need be.
Most definitely.
So thank you for the question. It's also very brave for you to ask. Poetry.
Yeah, poetry.
Sorry.
Yeah. How do you write your poem? What inspires you? What gets you to?
So many things. Everything.
Yeah.
I write poetry about literally everything. I have an app, like my notes app on my phone, are like when I think of something, I'll write it down. And then sometimes I'll sit down and write it and turn it into a full piece of poetry. So
The emotions play a big part of it.
sometimes yes, sometimes no.
How so?
Sometimes I neglect my emotions simply to write a really hard piece because I feel like it has to be written. But a lot of times then I sit with them and they cause me emotion. And how I relate with my poetry is different from how others do. So
Poets are sad people, right?
no. Oh my God, no. Maybe.
Sad people.
A lot of people will say yes, actually. We are. We tend to like our sadness. It gives good content.
Do you think poetry still holds the same power in the modern era like it used back in the days? Are people touched by poems like the way they used to?
I would say yes, definitely.
I
I
remember in
think.
primary we used to write love letters. I don't think people read those things right now.
Oh, what? Really? You need to find better circles. You need to be friends with more poets.
Really?
We love a good love letter.
So do you think it still plays an important role?
I think yes. I think some of the best ways I've expressed myself have been through poetry. Right. So I think it might not click for everyone. And this is something I admit, right? It might not be everybody's cup of tea. Poetry and words can be hard for some people to absorb and digest, right? But I do think because I don't live in I haven't experienced the olden age of poetry, I can relate it to, I have a very good cousin of mine. She used to love poetry, right? But it never really went anywhere as a passion because there were no spaces for poets back then, right?
Do you have better writers now or those old classics were there?
I think we're all amazing in our own right. I think and this might be
You're a
very
poet, you can't
diplomatic.
You can say this.
Yeah, this might be very diplomatic of me, to be honest.
I've read your book and really it's good.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Let's talk about the Grand Slam.
Oh my God.
Is that your peak moment in poetry? Is that the most euphoric moment you've had?
It's the one that made me the poet I am today, to be honest.
Talk about the journey to it.
Okay, so there's some.
What's Grand
Wait.
Slam? Let's get there.
Okay.
What's the Grand Slam?
The Grand Slam,
Yeah.
the Grand Slam poetry competition is when there are a number of poets who audition, and we have the three preliminaries, right? And from that, three poets are picked from each, and those 9 poets get to battle it out in what we call the Grand Slam. So think of it as like the ultimate poetry competition, especially here in Kenya and Eastern Central Africa, right? So I was supposed to go audition at some point, and then I got married.
Voilà.
And my wedding and the poetry day were the same
Is your
day.
husband a poet?
No, oh my
You didn't
God,
read
no,
poetry?
no.
Okay.
He loves my poetry, but he's not a writer.
Okay.
And so I then skipped a year. And the next year, I got sick. So I skipped another year.
Oh.
And that year, I got pregnant. Subhanallah. But I said, you know what? It's okay. It doesn't matter. I'm still going to try my best. So I auditioned, and I actually was number 4 at the preliminaries. And they only take the top 3. So, and I remember so
missed out.
vividly, no, Dorfin, Goofy, and Mufasa were the judges, and they allowed me to go to the Grand Slam stage. I was the wild card, and I was an exception
As a 4th.
as a 4th.
Okay.
They usually only take 3, and to this day, I always ask, what did you recognize? I speak to an amazing poet called Kevin Orato. He calls him the orator. I speak to him so much, and I have so much
I
conversations.
think you did an interview with him.
Yes,
Yeah,
I call him my poetry father.
Oh,
he's
nice.
he's like my mentor in poetry. And I remember I always ask Kevin, what did you guys recognize? And he's like, you were not your best self on that stage, and we recognize that you could do better. So just do it. And I remember going to the main stage and thinking, too many amazing poets, I'm just gonna go sit this one out. And subhanAllah, I came
Let me
first.
talk about some stanza in your poem that says that, is it me using the pain of other Muslims to win a poetry slam? What was that about?
I wrote a piece, and that was my first piece that I performed
Muslim
during the
privilege,
Grand
right?
Slam Muslim Privilege. And as I was writing it, I also had to sit. So this was not long after Westgate, right? And context, I wasn't at Westgate, but we were at Junction Mall, and we had friends who were at Westgate, and that was a very traumatizing period for us, as a friend group, as a family. And I remember writing about it and me thinking, this isn't my trauma to write about. So am I peddling other people's trauma for me to win this stage?
Yeah, here.
Yeah. And also, people like minorities, if we're being honest.
That line came out so well. That's why I remembered it.
Thank you.
It came so
And
well.
I think I always go back to, in the poetic space, we are few female Muslim poets, right? We have Binti Aisha, we have Najma, Drops of Melanin, we have Fawash, we have the Iron Lady. And mashallah, we are also amazing in our own right, right? We have Tasneem, who's in Light Academy Alumni.
Funny thing,
Love her.
I was to host Tasneem for I hope she'll come.
Oh, I'm gonna force her here. I'm gonna come back with her. Tasneem, if you're watching, I'm coming back with you.
She has very good points,
She
actually.
is amazing, and she recently launched her book
Yeah,
as
she
well,
launched
The
the
Erupted
book,
Voice.
yeah.
It's so beautiful, mashallah, and her writing is so beautiful. And every time I see one of us win, I think we all win, to be honest.
I never thought you knew Tasneem.
No. We
Happens,
started from here together, Light Academy.
you're together here.
Well, she was a year ahead of me. So, and subhanAllah, we reconnected so many years later.
I hope I'll host her one day.
I think I will make sure you do.
Thank you.
No, but alhamdulillah. So I think for me, and every time I go back to the Grand Slam, I recognize, and maybe this is my self-doubt talking. Did I win because I am a minority? Did they want it for aesthetic purposes?
Trust me, you just won because you're good. The poems are good.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So what next?
Many things. For my poetry,
You're still doing poetry.
but I am still doing poetry. I'm still active in poetry spaces. I am now a poetry judge, which I don't like doing, but I find myself doing a lot. There are amazing shows that I tend to go to for poetry, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Now, I think you've noticed in many of my questions in your poems, I go to your personal space, vulnerabilities. So how do you balance the personal space and vulnerabilities? And when writing your personal feelings and stuff in your poem, how do you balance that?
I don't.
You don't?
I put it all down. And then
But it doesn't all get to the printed
no,
media, right?
oh my goodness, half of it doesn't even get to the people, right? So I have people closest to me, for example, Lubna. Lubna is the person I throw all my poetry to, regardless of how messy it is. Of course, I refine it when it's going out to public, but I always say my poetry is like my version of journaling. So it is the rawest, most authentic version of my feelings. I never feel the need to clean it up.
What's the most challenging part of being a poet?
People not understanding that we're here to have fun, but we're also here to make an impact, right? I think we're very overlooked sometimes in a lot of different spaces.
We're here for a good time, not for a long time.
Not for a long time, exactly. Yeah, oh my, there's one of my favorite is vibes and inshallah.
Yeah, right.
I love that saying so much. But that's really who poets are, right? We're vibes and inshallah. But we have such an impact. We have, if you listen to a poet called Dorfin is amazing, right? Anthem Republic, these are amazing poets who speak about such amazing political issues. They speak about poverty. They are in such amazing spaces, and our words have such a big impact, but we're so overlooked.
Poetry takes a lot of creativity.
Yes.
I have a personal feeling that AI is killing it. Like, not poetry, AI is killing creativity. There's a saying that says that I want AI to do my dishes so that I can do my creativity. Not AI doing my creativity so that I can do my dishes. What do you think about that?
I wish. This is funny. My husband is doing his master's in artificial intelligence at Strathmore University. And I always think about how him and I are such a juxtaposition to each other. He is very IT, I'm very wordy and creative. But I think it can be our tool, but let it not take away the humanistic side of creativity, right?
Creativity is something on its own.
It will never have that personal human touch. I think we as people breed creativity within ourselves, within our spaces, and our
But
interactions.
now everything, the letters coming out, press statements are AI generated. The machine is, the language is very machine.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing is you can tell, right? Because
I don't know if everybody can tell.
Maybe not. And I think that's another thing is it's becoming smarter because it's being programmed by people, I guess. But I think more than that is nothing takes away the human touch.
That's true.
Right? And my husband, full disclosure, is trying to build that bridge to make AI better. But I always tell him nothing is going to take away that.
Lastly, if you could collaborate with any artist, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh my God, no, that's such a hard question. That is such a hard question.
You saved the best for last.
Oh no, oh my goodness. Any artist? Wow, whoa.
Never thought about that.
I have.
Okay.
But there's so many. There's so many for different things. I have no one answer. I can't answer you in one question. Like one artist? Oh my God, no. One artist that I think I would love to experience her poetry is Rupi Kaur.
Okay.
She's an amazing poet and she has poetry concerts and readings. And I think I would love to be in that space one day and just experience her poetry. I think her writing is
I've read
fantastic.
Shakespeare and all that, but I enjoy William Blake the most.
Oh yes. Oh,
Certainly poets are sad. I wrote one poem about 2 a.m. It's just
Oh,
about how
no.
sad it is. I'm not a poet, but I try to sometimes.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just about how
Yeah,
sad
a
people
poet
are.
at heart, aren't you?
Lastly, what are your parting shots? You know, being in school, Light Academy, there are students who are actually trying to find themselves. You took a lot of time. Maybe you had the privilege of changing from Strathmore to
Yes,
Riara to stuff.
yeah.
What do you tell about? What can you tell these young girls in school who are trying to find themselves?
I think for the kids in school, I would say it does get better. I know it feels like right now the hardest thing about life is the fact that you're in school, but there is a reality outside of school. And people always say enjoy these years because they're the best years of your life. I say if you're not enjoying them, that's also okay, but get through them, right? Make sure that you're there at the end of the day to see the other side. And try everything. I think before I got into recognizing that I'm a poet, recognizing that I am able to have my way with words, I also I'm a culinary certified pastry chef.
Oh,
I
nice.
did a level 1 and 2 certification in pastry making. So I did culinary arts. I did law, I did public speaking, I did and tried so many things. In high school, in Light Academy, I think I did World Scholars, I did MUN, I did, oh God, every single club. It was an excuse to get out of class, of course, but I did try it all. I tried basketball, I tried coaching, I was the head girl. So try everything, right? Step outside your bubble and see what you might enjoy, and maybe it will stick and it'll become who you are. And if you haven't found yourself, that's okay too. Don't feel the pressure to do just that right now. This is definitely a necessary conversation, I think. I'm really glad that we have spaces that allow us to talk about mental health and to explore more about mental health and poetry. Poetry is my favorite topic to talk about always, but I think part of the beauty of these podcasts is in the conversations. So I think we had a really good time having these conversations, and I'm hoping something stuck with someone out there. And if it did, then I think we've done our jobs. Thank you.
You and your brothers are all alumni of Light Academy. I hope your son will be one too. Let's leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the time.
My pleasure.
I've learned a lot, especially on mental health, and I hope to see you again.
Yeah, hope to see you again, and thank you for having me.
And say hi to your brothers, all of them.
I will, inshallah.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
All right. That's all.
All right. Oh, this was good.